Welcome back to ASTR. We're so glad to have you with us for our 23rd episode. This time, Ashley Chisholm, our Research Center Manager, highlights for us a story from This Week in Adventist History. And Ashley later appears to offer advice for anyone wanting to research Adventist history for themselves. Dr. Dragoslava Santrac, Managing Editor of the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists, joins me to share an interesting story from the ASTR. Finally, Meredith Carter, editor of the Annual Statistical Report, shares facts about the history of tithes and offerings in the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the latest statistics for the World Church's tithes and offerings. We hope you enjoy this episode of ASTR, which brings together the Adventist Church's past and present in order to inspire for the future.
This week in Adventist history, we celebrate an Adventist boarding academy in the U.S. state of Indiana. On November 29, 1925, Indiana Academy was officially dedicated on its property in Cicero, Indiana, at a program where then General Conference President William A. Spicer gave the keynote address. Spicer, as always emphasizing the church's mission, noted, "Already many of the young people of Indiana have gone across the seas, and I do not now recall where an Indiana boy or girl has disappointed us. The thin line of our missionaries belts the globe today, and in the erection of this school, the young people of Indiana are calling out to the old and worn laborers in the cause, 'Be of good courage, we are coming to help you.'" The school had not always been located in Cicero, nor had it always been called Indiana Academy. Around 1900, the constituents and officials of the Indiana Conference decided to open a school and set out to find a suitable location. In 1902, a beautiful grove on the farm of William and Laura Applegate near Bogstown, Indiana, was donated to the conference, and the school opened that autumn with 14 students. Bogstown Manual Training Academy operated from 1902 to 1905. That year, the school was renamed Beechwood Academy for the beechwood trees on the property, and its curriculum was expanded to include more courses, both intellectual and practical. But the school's aim, to educate the whole man physically, mentally, spiritually, remained. In early 1919, the conference decided that a more central location was desirable, making the school more accessible. After some time and scouting efforts, Indiana Conference President Charles C. Weist reported that they had found another beautiful grove, this one in central Indiana. He reported to the constituents that, "We stopped at one place which had a beautiful grove. We investigated and learned that the farm was for sale. The general surroundings did not appeal to anyone who might look for things actually up to date. However, when the owner told us that the price of the farm was $150 an acre, we stopped to investigate, for the farms in that vicinity were all priced from $250 to $300. We made a very close investigation and found that we had practically everything on this farm of 95 acres that had been specified in the discussion by the conference when in session. After we had been over the farm, the committee began to be united, and all felt that this was the place for the school. This was the first farm we had looked at that the committee was unanimously agreed upon. The farm was finally bought for the price of $13,720, including one half of the corn crop in the crib. With the new property in Cicero purchased, plans for constructing the buildings on the new campus and beginning classes there were put into motion. A groundbreaking for the new girls' dormitory was held on September 11, 1919, and classes opened on October 1st, with a camp meeting tent being used as the dining room, kitchen, chapel, and one of the classrooms. That winter, the girls stayed in the farm cottage, the boys in a small 16 by 32-foot building, and the principal, Charles W. Marsh, and his family stayed in a tent. As the years went by, the Cicero campus grew and changed. In 1940, the Indiana Conference purchased a 50-acre farm across the road from the main campus for the academy to operate. A gymnasium was built in 1952. A new administration building was erected during the 1959-1960 school year, and 3 smaller dormitories, the Northeast and West dorms, were built in 1972 and 1980 to replace the original 2. Lastly, an auditorium, music, and industrial complex was added in 1998. Indiana Academy's mission today is educating the whole student to know and serve God in their community. This alumna is happy to say that the story of Indiana Academy comes from this week in Adventist History.
We hope you have been enjoying the encyclopedia stories that we've been sharing in this program over the course of this year, and that you have visited the online Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists, the ASTR, at encyclopedia.adventist.org. The ASTR stories of our past missionaries and church workers worldwide are informative and inspiring as powerful testimonies to God's wonderful leading of His people in history. Did you know that many, if not most of these stories would be impossible to write and share today, were it not for the hundreds of faithful secretaries in the past who recorded events, sermons, meeting minutes, appointee files, obituaries, and other valuable historical documents? Today's story from the ASTR highlights some moments in the history of reporting in the Adventist Church and the role of an important recording technique called shorthand.
To save time is to lengthen life was written in shorthand on the back of this photo, showing 3 early shorthand reporters of General Conference sessions: E.E. Gardner, H.E. Rogers, and W.E. Cornell. Back in the time when there was no audio and visual recording systems, phonography or shorthand enabled people to write at the rate of speech and take accurate and full notes of meeting proceedings, sermons, and other discourses. Shorthand certainly saved time to many reporters and by extent lengthened their life by preventing fatigue and leaving time for other activities that would otherwise be spent on straightening notes. Reporting meeting sessions, sermons, lectures, and theological debates has always been important in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Devoted and able reporters and secretaries of all times have done their best to do their work accurately. In this photo, you can see an example of notes in shorthand taken at the 1897 General Conference session held in College View, Nebraska.
Several Seventh-day Adventist pioneers, including Joseph H. Waggoner, Uriah Smith, and John n.loughborough, began to learn phonography in the 1850s for reporting and preserving sermons, lectures, and theological debates. This task was extremely difficult for numerous reasons. For example, some Adventist ministers spoke at a rate of about 200 words per minute, with little or no recapitulation or repetition. Stenographers constantly repeated drills so that they could write with scrupulous precision and be prepared for any word, no matter how strange or unusual. In addition to these drills, professional reporters kept up with current events, especially in religion and politics, so that they could instantly recognize every name or technical term that might be spoken, including those in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. H. Edson Rogers particularly distinguished himself in the art of recording and was invited in 1889 to take up work at the General Conference office in Battle Creek, Michigan. This photograph of Rogers was taken shortly before he left Kansas to join the General Conference staff. The shorthand note states, H. Edson Rogers, Oronoke, Kansas, shorthand reporter and teacher. The next photo shows the reporting staff at the 1903 General Conference session held at Oakland, California. R.V. Ashley, H.H. Rose, C.C. Chrysler, and H. Edson Rogers.
Accurate reporting required sharply trained ears and a clear mind. With eyes fixed on the writing tablet before them, shorthand reporters had only one chance to hear every word as it was uttered from the podium and convert each one into a phonetic symbol. The task of recording was further complicated when people in the audience interrupted the speaker with a question or comment. When this happened, statements could overlap, making it much more difficult to accurately record what was said.
Since reporting sermons and speeches was extremely intense work, the Seventh-day Adventist Church began to regularly employ several stenographers in the 1890s to report on General Conference sessions. To prevent fatigue and to ensure better accuracy, as many as 6 reporters would report a single sermon or session, with a stenographer change every 15 minutes.
Those sermons and lectures were reported throughout the last half of the 19th and the first half of the 20th century. Shorthand's primary value shifted from the pulpit to the office. In the late 19th century, Americans were drawn to big businesses, and secretaries were needed to increase the production of top-level administration. Adventists adjusted their practice accordingly, and in 1898, phonography, though it had been taught since 1874 as an elective course, became a regular course in the commercial department at Battle Creek College and a requirement for graduation with a secretarial degree. When phonography first appeared, men primarily acquired the skill. This changed over time so that by 1930, the profession of secretaries became closely associated with the female gender.
Seventh-day Adventists, like other Americans, taught phonographic shorthand at various educational institutions up until the 1980s. Between the 1850s and 1980s, Adventists practiced and taught 5 different methods of shorthand: Pitman phonography, Graham phonography, Pernin phonography, the Success system, and Gregg shorthand. Though numerous phonographic reports were transcribed and published throughout these many decades, hundreds of pages of Adventist phonographic writing still await transcription.
Today, the General Conference Office of Archives, Statistics, and Research, known as GCASTR in Silver Spring, Maryland, is the successor of H. Edson Rogers's work in the field of statistical record keeping. Rogers's establishment of the Statistical Office laid the foundation for the work done by its successor offices. Indeed, Rogers inaugurated 2 serial publications of the Seventh-day Adventist Church: the Seventh-day Adventist Yearbook, an earlier version of which had been published from 1883 through 1894 and which was revised by him, and the Annual Statistical Report, whose publication as a separate volume was evidently Rogers's brainchild. Today, in addition to Adventist Yearbook and Annual Statistical Report, GCASTR is also responsible for the production of the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists.
A secondary but important role is supporting scholarship and church researchers throughout the world. Those who are interested in Adventist history and Adventist studies may make use of the General Conference archives and the Reebok Memorial Library, both of which come under ASTR. And, of course, check our wonderful resource on Adventist history, the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists, with over 4,000 articles and 11,000 photographs at encyclopedia.adventist.org. That's encyclopedia.adventist.org.
If you're wanting to do in-depth research on a subject from Adventist history, you may want to consider visiting the General Conference archives in person. But you might be wondering, how exactly can I do that? What steps should I take to achieve that? That is what we're about to cover. The first step is to do preliminary research in ASTR's online archives, available at documents.adventistarchives.org. Search especially within the minutes and periodicals available there. That research should provide you with enough contextual information to make an in-person visit productive. At this stage, you should also determine if the General Conference Archives has materials relevant to your subject of inquiry, whether that's through a search of our online catalog or through an email exchange with our archives staff. The second step is to go to AdventistArchives.org and fill out our application to conduct research, providing additional documentation when necessary, and to sign the Researcher Code of Conduct. By filling out and signing these forms, you're letting us know that you know how to do research, have a goal in mind, and are willing to abide by the rules that we have governing behavior during a visit. Such rules, like using only pencils or laptops to take notes and refraining from having food or water in your archival materials, are common to archives, whether they're a national archives or the General Conference Archives. These forms are available online on our main website, AdventistArchives.org, and can be accessed under the Scholarship and Research section. You would then send these forms as PDFs to archives@gc.adventist.org, while also providing possible dates for your visit. Our staff will then check the office calendar and make sure that the dates are clear for you to visit and confirm the dates. If the suggested dates are not open, our staff will work with you to figure out a time that works for both you and the archives. We do ask that research visits be set up at least 2 weeks in advance so that we can make sure that we are able to give each researcher an enjoyable research experience here at the archives. After the date of the research visit is set, the next step is to keep working through materials in the online archives and identifying items in the online catalog that you would like to see during your visit. We recommend communicating with our staff ahead of your visit so that your time during your visit is as productive as possible. The last step, of course, is to actually come and visit. Perhaps we will see you someday in the future at the General Conference Archives.
Welcome to the latest statistical nugget from the ASTR Data Collection and Publication team. In this episode's statistical nugget, we will explore the topic of tithe and offerings in the worldwide Seventh-day Adventist Church. In 1853, James White made his first appeal to Sabbath-keeping Adventists for financial support of the SDA ministry. This appeal was based on the Systemic Benevolence Plan, which focused on the importance of giving based on biblical scripture. It wasn't until 1861 that James White mentioned the term tithe in connection to systemic benevolence, and suggested that Adventists give 1/10 as a minimum contribution based on biblical principle given by God. But systemic benevolence continued to be how the church's work was supported for another 17 years. However, understanding of biblical tithing continued to develop, and at the General Conference session in 1878, the new tithing system was adopted. The reporting of systematic benevolence began early in our history. It was officially reported for the first time in 1867 at the 5th annual session of the General Conference. At that time, there were a recorded 4,340 members in North America, and their systematic benevolence offerings totaled 18,661. The offerings category has since expanded to also include Sabbath School mission offerings, other General Conference funds, intra-division funds, in-gathering funds, and local church funds. Meanwhile, in 1878, tithing as we understand it today was introduced. In 2022, the World Church recorded receipt of more than $2.7 billion in tithe, more than $122 million in world mission offerings, which includes Sabbath School, other General Conference funds, and in-gathering funds, and nearly $1 billion in intra-division and local church funds. Tithe and offerings totaled more than $3.8 billion. The faithful giving of our church members helps support the ministry of God's church. Our Seventh-day Adventist members around the world are committed to spreading the gospel of Christ by giving their time, energy, and money. For more information on the current initiatives of the church and how you can get involved in furthering the mission of the church, visit stewardship.adventist.org. And for more information on world statistics of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, go to AdventistStatistics.org. That's AdventistStatistics.org.
Thank you for being with us in this latest episode of ASTR. Join us again next time as we share interesting and inspiring information about the Adventist Church in history and today. God bless.